would you just...
Music therapy is very, especially in a hospital setting, you are thinking on the fly. I had one guy so we started singing an old song from the 30s. He was loving it so much that he decided he wanted to get up and dance. Well, he was hooked up to IVs, so he starts, he starts tugging on all of his IVs and they're almost pulling out of his skin. I'm like furiously telling him to clap. No, we're going to clap instead. I'm calling call lights. I'm trying to get nurses to come
Oh
in.
my God.
You can't go in with a plan because they will
Right.
throw out the window.
Okay. Oh, all right, McLaine. Pumped to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Of course.
So, for people who don't know who you are, which is basically probably everybody outside of our friend group,
Yeah.
why don't you give us a little background?
Okay, so my name is McLaine. I grew up outside of St. Louis in a small little corn town called Troy, Illinois, and grew up there for most of my life. Moved to Nashville in 2015, so I think I do qualify for the local card. At
Okay,
this point.
I think you're getting there. 6 years. Okay.
Yeah, it used to be 8, but I think
I was 17, so, and I call myself a local, so I guess yeah.
Maybe by about 2 years. So I went to Belmont here, undergrad at Belmont, finished that in 2019, and then started grad school at Tribeca.
So why Belmont? What was the draw there?
I gave myself a radius that I needed to get as far away from my family as possible
Okay.
within a driving range, just in case, because I'm very, cautious planner.
Right.
In case something happened, I was still 5 hours away. I knew I wanted a city because I grew up in the middle of nowhere. And then Nashville, at the time, actually, when I started Belmont, I was a nurse. And so I had research nursing programs in the area, and that one had a really good reputation, still does, and started nursing school at Belmont.
So what was the transition, and maybe kind of fill people in on what you're doing now? What was the transition from nursing to on the kind of clinician side of things? Well, yeah.
So it is a roundabout way of coming home.
Okay.
In several times throughout my life, I was like over music and decided to go a more scientific route, and always kind of found my way back.
Okay.
So very musical in high school, but I was from a town where your major was your job. So you went to nursing school to be a nurse. You went to accounting school to be an accountant. Like there was no vague jobs where I was from. It was a very like straightforward kind of place.
Right.
And I was like, well, there's no way you can do music unless you teach it. So I decided to go to school for nursing. Was about 3 months into it, hated it, and decided...
What was it in particular that you didn't like about nursing?
It just wasn't creative enough.
Okay.
I could have done it. It wasn't that it was not interesting to me. I do love... even as a music therapist, I had to take 2 semesters of anatomy. Not too far off, but there was no room for designing, and I tend to want to...
So you didn't get to really like flex that muscle enough in nursing to like protocols based?
Very rigid, for good reason. You don't need someone to get creative with your medicine. But I just felt that I was lacking, so I auditioned for the School of Music at Belmont and then transferred to music.
So let's step back. You've got this creative bug. You're involved in music. How did you get started in music? Like how old were you? What was it? Guitar? Was it sing? I know you sing. I know you play guitar. Which came first? I imagine probably singing, right? Because that's not as difficult as playing an instrument.
Yeah, I wish, I feel like people have such a good origin story about this stuff. My singing, my earliest memory of realizing that I was good at it, we were in 3rd grade. It was a rainy day. And we had to have inside recess that day.
Okay.
All my friends are sitting.
That's the worst, by the way, the worst way to have recess.
I know. So us girls were sitting in a circle, probably talking shit. Who knows? Am I allowed to cuss on your podcast?
Yeah.
Probably should.
Trust me, you're good.
And I remember them giving me Taylor Swift songs to sing, and her album had just debuted.
Was she?
It was like it was like 2007, 2006.
Okay.
And fresh off the press was that debut album, and I would just sing them to my friends.
Which is funny because we were at that trip that all of our friends were on a couple weeks ago, and you're still rocking out to the Taylor Swift songs.
Arguably character development.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
That was singing. From that point, it was just a quality of mine that I was good at.
So do you think, I've always been fascinated, do you think music is, or not music, but singing specifically, is something that everybody can learn, or is it something that you're born with? Because it's really weird when you think about it, right? The amount of people whose just regular talking voice is so annoying that I can't listen to it is very, very small, although there are some of those people. But then when we do this thing called singing, where we try to take our voice and pass air over our vocal cords and make it into notes, almost everybody, I feel like, is unbearable to listen to, except for, well, I'll go ahead and say that. Okay. But a much smaller percentage of people are very good at it. And so,
Sure. But there's so much that goes into it. So for one, I do think most anyone can learn to sing. And then caveat to that is, how are you defining singing?
Okay.
Are you saying everyone's going to be Ariana Grande? Absolutely not.
Right.
There are, like, clinically you can be tone deaf, but outside of that category, I think most people can learn to sing, but we have a couple of problems. They don't know how. They try to get creative and, like, do these things that they're agile. Like, it's like a workout. If you try to start squatting 100 pounds and you've never lifted a weight in your life, you're going to fail at it. You have to work your way up agility-wise, and then also tone.
So what are you doing, not to interrupt, but when you say you have to work up to it, how does that work? And is that something that's beneficial if you're starting as a kid and doing and singing your whole life?
So I started voice lessons in the 5th grade.
Okay.
And it was a lot of boring things to me, Italian little opera art songs, but it was breath work, pronunciation, vowel, how you hold your tongue, how you hold your throat. I mean,
really?
It's a whole body. And then from that point on, I was in voice lessons for the next probably 15 years.
No. Okay. So how often are you doing this? Voice lessons? Is it once a week?
I'm not. When I was, so in middle school I had them once a week, and I also did every, like, show and things like that. In high school I was part of the St. Louis Opera program, and so I had a vocal coach and a vocal teacher every week and would perform, like, in different opera halls and stuff, and that was probably the most interesting.
Did you notice your voice getting better as hopefully if you had the coach for 15 years, it was getting better, but could you notice, was it like a weekly basis or monthly, or did you go back and listen to old recordings and then newer ones and say, I've gotten better? How was that process?
It was a strength and power thing. And you also have to remember, you're, like, literally physically developing at this point.
Right.
Your lungs could not support the capacity at 12 that they can now.
Right. Okay.
In the same way that men's voice changes, women's voices do change in puberty, not as drastically, but there is.
As men's, yeah.
What was that?
Thunder, I guess.
Oh, goodness, blasting on the street. So yeah, that does change. I think the biggest thing is probably confidence.
Okay.
And I mean, I think half of singing is just acting like you feel like you know what you're doing. So
I don't know. I feel like I could go out there and act like I know what I'm doing. Maybe I don't have the other half.
You
right.
Can't just act it. You got to be like, I am walking onto the stage and singing 6 minutes of Italian that you don't understand, but my face has to convey to you that I know what I'm saying, even though I also don't know.
Okay. But does that make your voice sound better?
Yeah, because you have emotion, you're doing runs, you're breathing.
So you got to feel it. You got to lean into it.
Yeah, and you know, I did that, and then I also did musicals, which is, I mean, that part's in English.
So when you're with your voice coach, what are you, I don't want to say what type of exercises are you doing, but what are the exercises working or developing? Is it vocal cords? Is it pitched? I know you mentioned tone earlier.
Yeah, I would say it's the vocal coaching is a little different. So in my vocal coaching, I wasn't actually doing any of the art of the singing. It was like it's almost like a technical thing.
Okay.
So it would be, how long can I hold this note without taking a breath? How sharply can I, like, do a staccato on a note, or how high can I get my voice to go? I was a soprano, so it's a lot of, like, how up there can I throw my voice? Whereas my vocal teacher was a lot more like, how do I do phrasing? How do I move my hand in a way that conveys the art form? How do I play the piano? Like, more of that stuff.
Got it. Okay, I had no idea there was so much that went into this.
Yeah, opera tends to be a little bit over the top.
Wow. Okay, so you're singing, you're doing all this stuff. At some point you get into guitar. Yeah. So do you remember the first time you picked up a guitar?
That I do. So my dad, for a Halloween costume once in the 80s, was some kind of, like, rock star. And one day my sister, she was 6, she found that guitar in the basement and asked me.
So let's go into this with your dad.
He was not musical. He just had a funny, like, Halloween costume. It was like this old electric guitar that didn't have strings on it.
So fake guitar.
Fake guitar. And my sister brought it upstairs. She was 6 and I was 9. And asked my mom if we could take lessons. My mom was like, sure. So I started going to this guy at Swing City Music. He had super long hair, and my first song was Back in Black by AC/DC.
Do you remember how bad you were? Because I picked So I picked up guitar in April of last year of 2020 as like a pandemic hobby that I fell in love with.
Existential crisis.
Yeah. And I remember, I guess I just didn't think how like I didn't know how hard it would be to actually play an instrument. In my brain, I'm just, just learn to play guitar and like in 6 months I'll be great. I don't even think it was after I got the guitar that I looked up for the first time how many hours you actually need to put in to be good. But I just remember the feeling, because it was an acoustic, not an electric, so it was full bodied. I couldn't believe how uncomfortable I felt just holding it. Like I couldn't even get comfortable. And I just remember thinking, okay, this is going to be a long journey. And then somebody taught me how to play an E minor, which is the easiest chord there is. And it was like, made the worst sound I've ever heard. Yeah.
It is. I mean, to be honest, I want to tell you yes, but I was 9 and everything was hard. Math was hard. Friends were hard. So like this was just hard too.
Right.
I didn't put a lot of thought into it. I liked the technicality of it. I had a small electric. That was my first.
Okay.
And so my hands could barely.
Do you feel like that was easier than a big full-bodied acoustic?
I don't think my fingers could have.
Yeah.
Really, to be honest with you.
Is it easier? I've never actually played electric. Are the thinner strings on the electric a little easier on your, like,
a little easier because it's a lot more of that sliding. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess you get some of that in Roots acoustic, but even that, you picture like a burly man with like strong fingers.
Right, and a big mustache. Yeah.
Yes. So it was easier for that purpose. And then so I had that teacher for 3 years. It was very metal, like 80s music. My mom would just like put me at parties and I would just play songs my parents listened to.
Okay.
But after that, I switched to a new teacher that was all blues, and I wasn't allowed to use a pick. We were using sliders. We would just jam.
Like a steel slide?
Mm-hmm. And at that point, I'm now 12.
What's the difference? What brings something into being classified as blues? Is it playing 12-bar blues, or what is that? Is it just the chord arrangements?
Yeah, I mean, so you're not always, but a lot of what we do is just in the key of E for ease. It's a lot more, I mean, I guess the stuff I was doing before was still very improv, but I would say blues felt a lot more relaxed improv and like longer. Okay. It wasn't so rushed. A lot more rhythm was a much bigger deal than it was the melody that you were playing. So my sister would refuse to play anything like that was instrumental and fancy, so she would just strum in the background and I would be forced to just kind of play whatever to get our guitar teacher off our back.
Okay, interesting. Do you remember, was there a moment where you kind of felt, okay, I am actually pretty good at playing? Or do you feel like you just kind of, for me, I feel like it's been small accomplishments, and then if I look back at something I did 6 months ago, I feel like I'm better. But there's never been that moment where I'm like, all right, I'm good. And I was talking to somebody, a friend of mine who's a musician, and he's been playing for 15 or 20 years. And I said, how long did it take you to get good? And he's like, well, I still don't feel like I'm very good. I'm always improving. Yeah. Is that how you feel? Or?
Yeah, I think it would be boring if you're like, and I'm done.
So when did you feel comfortable enough or good enough to perform in front of people? Or is it just your parents were throwing you out there and sink or swim?
I mean, to be fair, not a single girl in my entire high school that I met played guitar.
Okay.
So the competition was low. And to be honest, like guitar was never my main thing. It was always singing. So guitar was sort of a means to the end. The voice was the main part. Oh, I can accompany myself. I was never going into it thinking like I'm going to be amazing. If I could like do a finger picking song and sing, that was
good
all
enough.
that I wanted out of it.
Yeah.
Singing, I think in high school I kind of realized, oh, okay, this is a little different. I went to state for Illinois and different competitions in the opera program, things like that, and for a while I really thought like I'm going to major in opera, I'm going to go to school in Europe. Like I thought that was what I was
when you say you go to state, what are you doing? Like, is it just individual singing competitions? They give everybody the same thing to sing and whoever does it best, or how does that work?
So all states do it. It's in different, I think it's called ILMEA in Illinois. So you do different things. You have to sight read, you have to sing scales they'll give you the first note and you have to sing a full scale in all the minor keys.
Okay.
And then you do some different excerpts of songs. And so they pick the top 3 out of the whole district to go to state, and then the top 1 to go to honors. And so I went to honors. So it's all the top best singer in each county of the state of Illinois coming together to sing.
Whoa. How'd you do in those?
I mean, at that point, it's just a mass choir, but it
right.
was easily the most beautiful thing I've ever sang. And even though we were all 17, I mean, those...
So this is junior, senior year in high school? Mm-hmm. That's incredible. Mm-hmm. So the singing for you has clearly been your favorite part?
For sure.
Still to this day?
For sure. I've messed around with banjo. I will say I tried violin at 18, and that was awful.
That's on my list to learn.
Oh my God, I thought strings, it would be fine. Awful.
Right, because you can play guitar, so you can play violin.
I would go to these classes. It was like Suzuki violin training. 5-year-olds are
What is that?
Ass. It's like the typical way that you would teach a kid.
Okay.
Violin, and I have literally little kid like blue, yellow, green stickers on my violin
to show you where to fret the. Why don't violins have frets like a guitar?
Because they're older, really. Like it's kind of almost.
But could you just put one on there to make it? Would it mess anything up?
No, but I feel violins do a lot more sliding of notes, and it's a lot less precise than maybe a guitar. Because the art is in the fluidity.
Okay.
I mean, spoken by someone that did it for 4 months. So ask.
Right.
Really
so you quit.
Oh my God, quit that.
But you do play banjo and piano.
Yes.
How do you find time to learn all this? Is it just being a kid and?
Banjo was a rejection of all of that opera because I just thought it was honestly hilarious of like an opera singer that plays banjo. Just like. Did
you want to do opera while playing banjo? Is that even possible?
There is one opera where that would make sense, but no.
So it was just you felt like you were in this group of opera singers who were very serious about opera, and it'd be.
I mean, I was.
You were, and so it'd be piss them off. Like you just wanted to get a razz out of them.
For sure, because this thing that I would go to, I was the only person from Illinois that would go to it. It was all like, and they were sweet people, but like very rich, affluent. St. Louis elite children whose parents took them to the symphony when they were 3. Like they just were talking about these operas. They seem so fancy. And I was like, what stick is up your guys' asses? So I was like, oh yeah, I'll learn banjo. And
I love that.
Yeah. And piano, my sister was always way better. She still is to this day. I did it as a ends to the mean in Belmont. I had to take piano for like 3 years because I was a music major. Okay. So I couldn't do it if you forced me.
Did you find that easier or more difficult than guitar, or different? Because I feel, as someone who's never played piano, on guitar, I mean, obviously if you fret the string, you have to fret the string correctly.
Yeah, there's a lot more.
It feels like to me you have to love on the guitar a lot more. It's a lot more of, just from observing, of a feel instrument, whereas piano is more timing and playing the right notes.
Yeah,
is that right?
I guess so. I would say so. The thing I didn't like is in general, as a principal, I don't like being told what to do. And in guitar, you can you have a G written. Other than that, you do what you want, kind of.
Right.
Right. Piano sheet music is extremely technical.
Well, you don't even have to be able to read music. I can't, to be able to play guitar.
Exactly. And so I was so used to doing what I want, and then you put the sheet in front of me. So what I would do, and this is what would fuck me over, is I would just memorize it and then get rid of it. And play
for piano?
Yeah, I hate if you make me like just read it. Whereas my sister, that would stress her out, but she got way better.
So what do you mean you'd memorize it and get rid of it? You would
I would memorize how it goes, and then the sheet music would go.
Just by listening?
Yeah, I mean, I would sit there and I would like actually think.
So you could read it somewhat. You would read it and play it.
Yeah,
the piano.
It would just slow me down, and I didn't like it. So I would, as fast as I could memorize music, I would, so that I didn't have to read that sheet of paper.
Meaning, read it during when you were playing in a performance.
Sure.
So when you performed, you had nothing in front of you, or did you just put it in front of you as a prop?
I've never. I don't have a memory of performing piano. I'm sure I have.
Okay.
But I was so used to having to memorize lyrics and stuff. It's much more familiar to me to just memorize something and then get it out of my face.
Okay. It's fascinating. Okay, I want to circle back to the singing for a minute. Okay. So take somebody who's like me, 28, almost 28 and a half. Yeah, it's crazy. Can't carry a note in a bucket. What should somebody like me do if they want to learn how to sing? Or if they went to a vocal coach, what would they actually be learning to do? And how good could they actually expect to become? Right? Because I know we're not going to be Whitney Houston or Ariana Grande, but can you be at least not difficult to listen to?
So you've added a lot of subjective definitions.
Okay.
So how do I know if I'm good? How do I know if I'm not awful to listen to? You place all your expectations on people that are not you, and that's where you're going to just end up making yourself mad.
Okay.
So your expectation has to be, when am I going to feel really good about how this is going? Maybe I know how to sing this song. I can hold a note for this long, like something a little more tangible.
Mm-hmm.
A vocal coach would start by seeing how well you match pitch, which is just they would play a note on the piano and you would try and sing it, and that would give you a lot of information.
Is that, and I don't want to be vague here, is mismatching of pitch where a lot of people go wrong? What is it that the layperson listens to somebody who can't sing and they say that doesn't sound great?
Most of the
Is
time,
it you're supposed to be a G or an E and you're not hitting it, or
sometimes,
what?
but you'd be surprised how many people can like actually just sing the note. It's more of a, how are you placing that note in your throat? Are you straining up to it? Because like, so there's all these different kinds of voices, we'll call them. So you have your head voice, which is when it's really lofty. You have your chest voice, when it's like full bodied, almost like musical theater style.
Mm-hmm.
And people will try to use that voice to sing high.
And voice meaning like where you feel the note coming? Yeah.
So like your chest voice, you do feel it like really deeply in your chest. It's a lot lower. It's a lot more in the gut. Your head voice is almost like you're using the space almost where your soft palate is in the back of your throat. If you yawn, it'll rise up. That like yoky feeling, that's where you're like creating a lot of space and air to get this head voice feeling of arching up and up. You'll always see a voice teacher like, like doing that motion to get up and over the note. Otherwise, it sounds like you're poking at it from underneath and you sound like you're straining for it.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So going back to before, let's define, can we put some definitions on good or bad, or is that not possible?
It is possible, but you have to define them for yourself.
I would say good is if you were to perform in front of a random group of people, they wouldn't think it was bad.
Yeah.
Can people expect to get there?
I mean, I really think so. So, okay, classic example. Do you think Bob Dylan sounds good when he sings?
No.
Do you think
He's
Tyler
okay.
Schindler sounds okay when he sings?
Childers?
Yeah.
I think he's amazing.
But his voice, when you hear it, it is not intuitively like, that is a pretty voice.
That's a good point. So when he sings, let's take an example, like Nose on the Grindstone.
Right.
He's just, he does have there is that, you can hear, I don't know how to describe it. It's like you were saying, the belief thing. There is a belief in what he is singing that drives the note through.
Yeah, because people want someone interesting.
Right.
You know how many people, myself included, can just sing prettily? Like, I would kick ass at singing harmony for a background person. There's a reason I'm not Ariana Grande, though. It's a tone, it's a difference, it's a uniqueness. That is hard.
Is it a style? Can you say style? Can you wrap all that up into style?
You could, but even style is so I could sing a song in a jazzy style, in a pop style, in a country style. I can do that. But to have the tone quality of Miranda Lambert, you're born with that.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just the nature of like the way that your voice is designed, and that way that you can listen to something on the radio and you are like, that's this person.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really duplicate that.
Right. But you can still...
But you could sing background for them.
Interesting. Okay. So that's childhood, very musically oriented.
Very musically oriented, yes.
Then you come to Belmont, you do the nursing thing.
Brief time. Such a brief time.
And did you go in, was it musical based therapy that you were getting into?
Yeah, so I had
that you got into after that?
heard of that before coming to Belmont. Vaguely heard of it, but once I got to Belmont, I was like, oh, this is like a legit, thing. Switched over, and so nursing is obviously in like health sciences, but music therapy is stored within technically the School of Music. But we took psychology, we took nursing classes. You kind of take things in a really
What
broad
degree do
scale.
you get?
Bachelor's in music.
Bachelor's in music.
So I took just as many music classes as any other music major at Belmont, with the added music therapy, like foundations classes.
Okay. So can you tell us a little bit about what you did in Arizona with the music therapy stuff?
Yeah,
I'd
I'll
love.
work my way up to there.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
I love that.
First, I'll start more with a definition, I guess, because I think music therapy can be really confusing.
Yeah.
So music therapy is really, at its essence, just using music to achieve non-musical goals. So
Okay.
I'm not trying to teach you how to play guitar. I'm not trying to teach you how to sing. I'm trying to help you increase your motor function, work on speech, socialization, depression, anxiety, all those things. I'm just using music to get there instead of other ways. And there are plenty of ways to solve all of those things. This is just additional. So you start off by doing, we had to do piano, guitar, voice lessons. We also, like I said, anatomy, psychology. We had rotations while we were in school. Little, semester-long ones. I did nursing homes, Sarah Cannon Cancer Center downtown.
Right.
I lived in Scotland for 6 months and did a rotation out there. So did all of that, and then at the end of your school, you do a 6-month-long internship anywhere in the country. Tennessee doesn't have one, so my ass packed up to Arizona.
Okay.
And I lived in Phoenix, Arizona for 6 months.
And this was like 2 years ago?
Yeah,
2019?
Fall of 2019, right before COVID.
Okay, awesome.
Which is funny to think back on being in a hospital, in Arizona, which
right.
is right next to California where things started getting crazy. So anyway, that was a full-time gig for 6 months, and I was primarily part of the palliative care team, which is all, works a lot around hospice and
where, like, with who? Was it
Banner University Medical Center? It's
okay.
the largest hospital in Arizona, but it's in downtown Phoenix.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you're interning with a palliative care group within this hospital system?
Yeah, I'm interning under the music therapist that's the fellow there. And then she sits in on the palliative care team. But we could get a consult for anywhere in the hospital. We had various programs. So most of my job, I would say, was end-of-life care for cancer.
So palliative care, for people that don't know, is kind of the step between, it's pre-hospice, right? Like last 12 months of life.
Conversations around, like, this might not be going the direction
okay.
that maybe you want it to go. How can we talk about comfort? How can we talk about care, that kind of thing. And they do have the hospice conversations in the hospital, especially if it's looking like they're not going to be able to go home on hospice. Mm-hmm. Palliative care would step in and do that.
So what is your role with these palliative care patients? What are you doing day to day?
So most of the time with those folks, it was a lot. I mean, this is awful, but they didn't have family coming in. It was very lonely. And they were really sitting with these questions of realizing they're dying alone, they have regrets, like,
it's terrible,
all of that stuff going on. And most of the people that come into the room are poking at them and not giving them any agency. So it sounds silly, but most of the time I was going in and just giving them choice. Do you want to listen to this or that?
And that was enough.
That was enough. And from there we would, go.
So when they say, do you want to listen to this or that, are you walking in with a guitar?
Oh yeah, I had a cart I would pull behind me. And it had,
what are people, are you getting a lot of funny looks in the hospital walking around with
yeah. I had there's the music lady.
And I'm sure the doctors.
Some of them were so kind and so amazing and understood the importance of what we do. Some of them thought I worked for free, and that was like, when I
you were
told
just
them
like
you
a
had to
crazy
have a
person
bachelor's degree to do this, they were floored.
Okay.
So it was mixed messages, mixed bag, but most of them, especially on the ICU and that kind of thing, they just wanted someone to kind of help support.
Right.
So yeah, I had this little rolling cart, and it had instruments, drums, a piano, an iPad.
Did these folks know you were coming, or did you just walk in and say, hey, I'm McLaine, I'm here with a guitar to play you a song?
Yeah, some of them would. So nurses would call consults on us, and I would get in and my computer screen would show like where I would go, and I would plan my route for the day. Most of the time, the patient didn't actually know I was coming.
Okay.
The nurse was just like, this one's struggling. Could
okay.
come check on them. So I would, introduce myself, talk through music. Sometimes it was just playing for them. Sometimes we would do songwriting. And a lot of times with those folks specifically, it was legacy building. So writing songs for their family after they passed, or sometimes
writing Okay, let's get into that.
Yeah, so sometimes it was...
Would you help them write songs?
Mm-hmm.
What's that process like?
It varied. So I had folks who had breathing tubes, and they could not speak. The breathing tube was through their throat. And I would come in and be like, you want to write a song? And they would look at me understandably like, well, I can't do that.
Right.
And I would find ways for us to do it. So I would hold up 2 words, tap this foot, because, they still had control over their blinking.
Did you start with a melody?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I would have a lot of just yes/no questions to get to songs they like, and then we would write a song using the hospital room around us. I would have them set a drum up on the end of the bed, and their toe would tap the drum. So it was a lot of modification, and then I would play their song. And
are there lyrics, or is it just the melody?
No, I would be like, so for example, it'd be a line like, I want to go to, and I would say, your left hand is beach, right hand is mountain. They would raise one of them. So I want to go to the mountain. And then we would write a whole song kind of using choice words. And it was, I know it sounds so silly.
That is so cool.
That was the only person that came in and asked them, like, how is it like to be a human today?
Right.
I didn't poke them. I didn't make them get out of bed. I made eye contact with them, like things like that.
I think so much of that gets lost in our healthcare system.
It does.
As somebody who works in healthcare, so much of it is data driven, and obviously on the clinical side, driven by the medical or the most recent medical literature. One of the things that I've worked on in my career in healthcare, as things shift there's a shift in healthcare away from what's called fee for service. So I'm just going to give you a treatment, a therapy, a drug, and I'm going to get paid for it. So that's fee for service. And it's shifting to what's called value-based care. And the amount of like hospital readmissions you can prevent, let's say somebody goes to the hospital, they get discharged home, and then they need certain drugs, right? The amount of, we would send somebody to their house just to make sure that they took the drug, or that they, like a lot of these people couldn't even get to CVS to pick up the drug. And so they wouldn't take it, and 3 months later they readmit, or they didn't have a way to go to the grocery store. So they wouldn't, or they didn't like to drive, so they wouldn't eat a lot, and they weren't healthy or nourished. And then they'd go back, and every time something happened, they didn't have anybody to take care of them. So they wouldn't go to the doctor, and they'd just go to the hospital. And it's a little bit of a digression, but there's so much of the human aspect of healthcare that's lost.
And I think the privilege is to assume that so a different job I had after all of this, actually, after Phoenix, was as a social worker in a nonprofit here in town that only takes 10 care. And it was, my job was, I would pick you up, I'd take you to CVS.
Right. That's such a good thing.
And, COVID messed with a lot of that, but these people just didn't have access to those things. And I had a literal job. Part of my job was hospital readmit. So if someone had gone to the ER this many times, I had all these protocols I had to do with that person so that the hospital was not getting mad at me.
Familiar with that. No, it's it's the human aspect, right? And it's such a difficult thing to deal with, because there is nothing that drives innovation and advancements in medicine like the profit motive and the dollar and people getting rich. But you also have this balance of there are people that you're dealing with. And that's one of the things I've been really lucky to deal with in my career, is kind of how to shoot the middle between profit and actually getting patients what they need, which is so fascinating about what you've done, because it's this way to really bring the human aspect back into healthcare, especially in a hospital. Like they're some of the most miserable places.
But I think we present this binary situation, and I really don't think that it is.
Yeah.
I think that's easier to believe. But so, for example, part of my project at Phoenix was I wanted to prove that music therapy was not only great and additive, but cost effective. Mm-hmm. So I did a pilot study where I had a group of patients that I would sit with, and we would do music therapy before their MRI, and then a group of patients where I did not. And
so this is like a statistic, yeah.
Yeah.
What were the results of that?
So the results were the people that I worked with this group of people, all of them had one MRI and failed for anxiety, which means they have to redo it. And
because they were so nervous, they couldn't stay still. Exactly. They're moving around.
And as you know, an MRI is hella expensive on the hospital.
So everybody, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Everybody who's in this test, they've all already failed for anxiety.
Yes, for some nervousness, not because of the machine or anything, but just they got nervous, they needed out, whatever. One group got music therapy, one group didn't. That group, not a single person.
Did they get it right before they went in?
So I had my own MRI. It was a whole fleshed out thing. I would sit with them in the waiting room. We did relaxation techniques. And I didn't even sit with them in the hospital.
Is it like for relaxation? Are you doing breathing techniques?
Mm-hmm. So I would have the guitar, and as we did a roll up, like dun 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 dun, you'd breathe up, dun 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 dun, breathe down. And they also, so that was part of it. That was like the live experience. And then while they were in the MRI, they got to decide what music they wanted to listen to, because typically they just play whatever.
Right. See, I got an MRI a year or two ago, and they had a TV. It was on my knee, and it was small enough to where I wasn't fully encased in the thing. But they had a TV, and they did actually let me pick.
That's nice.
And I feel like that helped.
It does help. And, I guess it's hard to say, was it that part or we just wanted to show music in general. So all that to say, the group that got music, not a single one had a readmit of anxiety. That alone, so I added up the cost of the group that didn't get music therapy, covered my salary. So
just the savings.
This little MRI study paid for music therapy.
That's
And
fascinating.
that was maybe an eighth of what I did.
Were you measuring their heart rate, blood pressure, like before and after, or was it just kind of a pass-fail? This person.
I mean, someone was measuring those things. I didn't collect it just because I didn't want to log it all. But like the techs were measuring those.
So of the, what's it called in statistics? Of the group that you didn't do any music therapy with, what's that called?
Your control group.
Control group. Thank you. How many, was there an uptick in the number of them that passed? Because I would imagine if I had failed once, maybe I'm a little more
A lot of times
geared.
they're worse because they know what can happen if they fail. The expectation of themselves.
So now they've ramped up that anxiety as well.
And honestly, a lot of them, they're not just doing these MRIs for giggles. A lot of these MRIs are, if the results of this MRI will tell me if I have brain cancer. Like they're not in there for any restful purpose.
Right.
So
it's not even something like a knee tear, right? That even if it's bad, it's surgery.
All, anyone that's getting that, it's a brain thing. It was all,
Okay.
MRI of that level. So, just all that to say, I think we present it often in the world of, it'd be so nice if we could have these additive services. But what I was trying to show is like, this is not even additive. This is actually reducing the cost. It's not even this fluffy extra thing. Like, I'm saving you money.
No, we do that at our company. We have like it's a wound care program for patients who are going into home health. And a lot of patients come into home health from their PCP. Yeah. And turns out a lot of them don't know how to write proper wound care prescriptions. And so we teach nurses who are providing home health in the network how to actually provide proper wound care. And there's like a whole set of protocols. And it's simple stuff. Turns out saline and gauze isn't the best thing for every patient who has for every type of wound. And so, it's an additive service, but it ends up saving so much money. And patients, they're alive, having to deal with a wound that's now infected because it wasn't treated properly, and then they
what's the
readmit.
cost of someone's annoyance and frustration?
Right, it's hard to put a dollar on that. I'm blown away by that. So I want to circle back to the songwriting though with the people. So what is step one? Is it just, how much of it is your template versus their decision?
So it's a bit of a spectrum. I would say in a hospital setting and in most settings, I'm coming in with a song that's already written that because you're usually not a musician. This is usually not something that you do frequently.
Right.
And there's a high entry level anxiety to this.
Right.
And I'm usually just changing certain words.
Okay.
And those words have different purposes. So for some patients, it was legacy songs, which just a song they could, oftentimes I would record these and give them to them, even when I wasn't there, and it would be a song they could listen to think about a time that's not in the hospital. There were other, when I would work in schools, a lot of kids with autism and things like that, we'd rewrite songs, and they would be their getting ready morning routine. I brush my teeth, I comb my hair, that was the purpose of it, was to remember how to get ready.
There's something very powerful about writing. Not just with songs, but I think songs do a particularly good job of it, especially in the emotional aspect. I think writing in general, so let's step back. If you are ever confused about something and want to figure it out, try writing it down. And I do a lot of that in work when we were doing something strategic, to take it from an idea in your brain to a presentation that's in a PowerPoint. You really find out where the holes are in your thinking. That's a little different in music. But I think I've tried to write songs, and I've found the only time I've been successful is when I'm emotional, and for whatever reason, you can channel all of these feelings that are jumbled up and then put them onto a piece of paper. And it's bizarre when you think about it, that then people can read those later and feel those same emotions.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think it speaks to just the deepness of music, and not in any woo-woo way, but just something about that is human and how it can convey and make someone emotional.
Yeah.
Even though they've listened to this particular arrangement of sounds.
Yeah.
700
Well, you find music everywhere in every society throughout history, right? So it's a human universal. But did you find that process of writing these songs with these patients helped them from an emotional standpoint to kind of grapple with what they were dealing with?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was, two reasons come to mind. One, I think any kind of writing, whether it's songwriting or journaling, is externalizing. So this thing is not stuck in me, it is now out here. And when I put some distance in between it, I can feel like I can tackle this because it's confined now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of it. I think the other thing is just, someone else can read this and feel the same way. That's connection building.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of them had really isolating experiences and felt like no one really understood. So I could show them this song. Like, for example, I had one guy, he actually was a piano teacher.
Mm-hmm.
He had cancer, and I brought him a piano, and I would bring a guitar, and he would just decide what we were going to do that day. And he wrote so many songs.
So he would say piano or guitar, and then you'd go from there?
We would just, improv it out. He would pick a key. He was shouting things at me. He was very energetic.
Right.
He wrote so many songs that they ended up doing a concert at the hospital for him. And it took us probably an hour to get him downstairs, just taking breaks.
So let's step back for a minute. What's the process with him? Like, does he say, I want to write about X, Y, or Z today?
To be fair, this man was a 30-year-long music teacher.
Right.
So he could just
okay.
With someone that's not musical, I have to have a little bit more structure when I go in because they're lost. They don't know.
Right.
So I'll say, probably we could write about this. What do you think? Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Did you have a list of things just kind of on deck or would you just...
Music therapy is very, especially in a hospital setting, you are thinking on the fly. I had one guy so we started singing an old song from the 30s. He was loving it so much that he decided he wanted to get up and dance. Well, he was hooked up to IVs, so he starts, he starts tugging on all of his IVs and they're almost pulling out of his skin. I'm furiously telling him to clap. No, we're going to clap instead. I'm calling call lights. I'm trying to get nurses to come in.
Oh my God.
Go in with the plan because they will
right.
go out the window.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to go from there. So, okay. Do you write songs personally? Yeah.
I haven't in a while. I definitely have. I kind of go through phases with it. I journal almost every day.
What is your process if you're writing a song?
I'm one of those lyrics first people, and then
the melody comes later.
Yeah, some people will do accompaniment first.
That's interesting because I have to have a melody. If I'm going to try to write something, I have to get on the guitar and start playing a melody, and it's like that brings out the words.
Yeah, I think everyone's different. I think as a singer, that part, I don't need a guitar to do that.
Right.
So I could just hum poetry, and there's my song, and then I'll find a guitar to back it up later.
How do you find, I don't want to say inspiration because I feel like that's such a loaded term, but how do you find subject matter for your songs? I feel like if you
just kind of walk through the world.
Are you always, when you were writing songs, are you thinking, I feel like you have to change your viewpoint so that you're looking for things, not that it's hard to find when you start looking. Are you kind of walking through the world in a way that's, oh, there's a song. Oh, there's a song.
I think I already walk through the world in a way of and I have since a child of oh God, how do we come up with doing it this way? I'm just a very analytical person, and I have to make meaning out of morning coffee. I just have never been able to just chill. And so I think I naturally come to everything with even in here, looking at the things on your walls and figuring out what kind of person is Joe? I can piece together these little symbols throughout your
what
house.
What do you, yeah.
Accounting, this is very nice desk. I see you like America. Just these little things about you.
Right.
And I'm always noticing. And I think now as a therapist, I don't miss a beat either in what someone says or what they're not saying.
So you're analyzing people all the time when they're speaking?
Yeah.
From a therapist?
It feels so intense.
Okay, yeah.
I'm a very detail-oriented person, and I think I listen well. Both,
okay.
Yeah, like I said, what you're saying and what you're not saying.
Okay.
That's equally important.
What about what people are not saying is important?
Well, normally we omit things for a reason.
Okay.
Whether that's shame or embarrassment or unawareness of how we're experienced in a relationship. So I think, it's interesting what people will sort of decide their narrative about a situation is and what blind spots I can kind of see on either side.
It's interesting that you use the word narrative. because song is a narrative. If you look at what drives cultures, religion for a long time, it's all based on a narrative, right? I guess I'm getting to this point where it's fascinating as humans how much of how we think about history, our lives, etc., is told through story.
Yeah,
right?
I'm a big proponent of storytelling, and especially, so I think we think memory is like a camera. We can play our memory back, and that's how it always is. It's just,
I wish, right?
I wish we would be awesome investigators, but it's not. And I think for forever humans have been, the way that we think of stories in our brain fits the narrative of who we think we are as a person and how we think the world is.
Well, you take what you want and what is important about the memory to help you map out what you should do in the future, right?
Yeah.
So in some ways, the story can be more important than what actually happened, in my opinion.
100% is, and often, especially the therapy work that I do is, you've created this story about how you are as a person, and you're only now accepting evidence of that. If alternative evidence shows up, you're throwing it out the window.
Right.
And now we have this story that you've decided that you are to the world, and it's not working because you're losing your relationships or whatever is happening.
It's bad enough that you've felt you need to come in and talk about it.
And I do a lot of trauma work, so a lot of those stories are deeply ingrained, and they're there for a reason. They got this person to me because it was very productive, but after a while, those stories don't serve us anymore. We can kind of drop those narratives.
But do you have to replace the old narratives with new narratives? There's always some sense of story, right?
Well, yeah, because that's your sense of self.
Right.
You can't drop it completely, or else you're a blob. But I think it's very hard to let go. So there's a space. There's a space between letting go and picking something back up again, and that space is fucking terrifying because it's the sense of not being tethered to something, and no one wants to feel that way because we like control.
Do you see that when you're with patients where they have that moment where they've kind of dropped the story, the old story?
I see it every week. I mean, in little ways and in big ways. I do work with individuals and couples. I think that is almost where I see most of the story dropping.
Yeah.
Because they've decided that their partner is the problem.
How do you get to that point? What's the process? Is it poking holes, or are you asking questions are you like an attorney?
Kind of. It is investigative. I think, actually attorneys and therapists are not all that different in how they go about things. I think therapists...
I think they know the answers to everything. No, I'm just kidding.
We ask questions in a very circular way.
Almost like Socratically?
Very Socratically, sort of around it. Whereas an attorney might be peppering you a little bit more, and they have an answer they want you to give. Mm-hmm. I want you to arrive at your own answer, but I'm going to kind of circle around it because I think you know what it is, and we just have to find it.
So you have to, I think this is something that I've done in the business world, especially in sales roles, is you have to make them think it's their idea almost to a degree.
I mean, that...
Or you can't be the one that's convincing them of it. You have to ask them questions that makes them realize it.
Yes, because I am never here to insert and it would be unhelpful for me to give you the right answer. I think therapy is often put on this pedestal of, I'm going to go to McLaine and she's going to tell me how to live my life. Mm-hmm. And one, I can't because I don't know. Two, that would be unhelpful. I think everyone needs autonomy. Mm-hmm. And so, I need to find the right way to ask questions so that you arrive at an answer that feels true to you. I don't care what that answer is, but I do need to help you find it.
What would you do in the case of a couple? Because I know you mentioned couples is where you see a lot of it fall apart. Is that different than an individual, or is it just, how do I say this? Are you just asking one person the question, or are you asking both? Is there ever a moment where you do say okay, it's way more one person than the other, and try to hone in on one person? Or is it kind of, hey, it's pretty much usually 50-50 and both people could be better?
Yeah, there's a couple parts of that question. I think one, so with couples therapy, your client is the relationship, which feels a little vague, but you always have to kind of think in your mind, you are not my couple, or you are not my client, you are not my client. This relationship is my client. What does this relationship need? And so that's sort of like allegiance-wise. In terms of, you're more the problem, that's more of like a linear thinking. He did this, she did this, he did this, she did this. Whereas I think of it more as circular. So the more that he pushes her, the more she withdraws. The more she withdraws, the more he gets angry. The more he gets angry.
So that sounds like pattern recognition, right?
It's extremely pattern recognition, extremely... So the whole point of couples therapy is identifying your negative cycle. And cycle is an intentionally chosen word because it means both parties are contributing to this sort of tornado feeling. It's not one person doing it.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot there. Okay, so I'm trying to think of the best place to go here. Can we talk a little bit about Scotland? Because I know you did some really cool stuff there, and I know you briefly, you just like glazed over it, like very humble brag. I was in Scotland, and then I did this, then I sang an opera.
I was in Scotland for about 6 months. I did it so I was doing like an internship exchange program. So technically I had like a working visa and did an internship with Nordoff Robbins Scotland, which is a big music therapy.
Is this pre
it is pre
Arizona?
Yeah, so
okay.
I was a junior in college. I turned 21 in Scotland, which was
nice. Is it 21 drinking age there, or is it 18?
But
so it was like the most uneventful 21st birthday ever.
It was actually very special. So I was in school, kind of. I did 2 classes, and no one took it all that seriously.
What was the name of the university you were with?
Edinburgh Napier was the college, but they...
Big fan of that one.
Yeah. You've heard of it. I mean, I had probably cumulatively 3 hours of class a week.
Okay.
Nothing.
How do I should have done that.
I know, it was amazing. And so I did that. I had internship, and I would, get on the train. I was all of these older Scottish people, music therapists over there, and I would ride with them, and we would do random sessions. I was in Edinburgh schools. One time they sent me on a train up north, and I like unpacked a building. It was random.
Okay, hold on. We got to step back. Where are you going? You're getting on a train with a bunch of old Scottish guys.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would go everywhere. I went to Aberdeen. I mean,
not geographically.
Yeah.
You get off in Aberdeen, or where the hell that is. And where do you go from there? Are you going to a hospital? Is it...
I wasn't in any hospitals. That was mostly school settings.
Okay.
So a lot of times I was in special education programs, after schools. I did a lot of day programs for adults with dementia. So we would sing, like I would just kind of scoot along in a back room, and the only Scottish song I know is Auld Lang Syne. It was New Year's. We went with it. They would loudly sing. They were all very confused by my first name being McLaine.
That's a last name there, right? Yeah. I didn't even think about that.
I know. And so, I mean, I did various things, and then I also was helping with some research and stuff with the practice. And then on top of all of that, getting back to my 21st birthday, I was on the soccer team for the university as well. So we would travel around and play different games. So on my 21st birthday, I came into the locker room after our game, very Ted Lasso energy. And the whole team, they were so proud of themselves because it was me and one other girl.
It's a pretty big drinking environment over there, right? Huge.
I mean, that's the drunkest I've ever been. All the girls had a cake and candles, and they were so excited.
Oh, that's awesome.
Party in the USA because they were like, this
is the only American song we know.
And we celebrated, and
What are people drinking over there?
A lot of cider.
Oh, that sounds so heavy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of whiskey, but it's kind of not as common for girls to drink beer. At least, the world.
I would have thought they were all.
The boys are drinking a lot of beer, but
are they drinking like big heavy beers? Is Scotland one of those places where there's a big brewery in every town, almost with local beers, or?
I mean, whiskey's definitely a bigger deal, but I think the biggest thing, I mean, I was in college, so I'm sure all of that existed.
Right.
We had no money, and we were traveling to like a different country every weekend. Like, the money we actually spent in Scotland was minimal.
Right.
So it was a lot more pubs and dancing and just like the shittiest version of their Bud Light that you got,
So what are these old Scottish dudes that you're traveling around?
Funniest fellas. I mean, they, so when I got there.
And you said they're musical therapists?
Uh-huh.
So how long has this been around?
Since the 50s, probably.
Is it gaining traction now? Is it bigger in Europe maybe than it is here in terms of?
It's different. So
it's different.
So Europe tends to be a lot more, like I said, that Nordoff Robbins kind of music therapy. It's a kind that's way more improvisational, way more free, a lot more piano. it's not so structured, which I think fits with the European way. Naturally, the Americans couldn't handle such a lack of structure. So we created like cognitive behavioral music therapy, and
we had to subdivide it into
subdivide it and measure it and have it like quantified.
I can tell by the look in your eye that you despise the fact that we did that. It feels anti what you're trying to do, right?
I don't think it, if we're going to go for it, like I think in America we've tried to force music therapy into a box that our culture will accept, which I think is probably faster to get where we want to go, but I'm not sure that it's the best thing long term.
Okay,
we tried to make everyone like see it as this thing that's just like physical therapy, just like occupational therapy, and they have a lot of similarities. But what's so wrong with having it also be creative, like you were saying, and also have it be free and just for the purposes of having fun? I'm a little worried that we've so hardly tried to prove ourselves to everybody that we're gonna lose that magic in trying to like fit the mold of the way we've kind of created things.
Did you see that in some of the stuff you were doing?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, I did in Phoenix a big, and I do really like this model. It's neurologic music therapy, and it's extremely structured. You can bill insurance for it. It's a lot of times used with stroke, people who have experienced a stroke, and learning them to walk again, and a lot of like stability and movement. And that school of music therapy is extremely like regimented, neuro-based, not a lot of creativity. Everything is an acronym, you know.
No kidding.
And when you say that to someone in Scotland, they look horrified. So it's just interesting how the same field can look so different. I mean, therapy is the same way. You know, counseling therapy is the same way. You have people that are extremely rigid, beliefs, thoughts, patterns kind of people, and then way more esoteric and analytic.
So I might be getting out of your realm of expertise here, but do you think we, since we're on the topic of American culture, do you think we as a society focus too much on medicine and drugs to treat a lot of the things that people are going to therapy for? Or do you think that there's a benefit to it? Because it seems to me that if you're depressed or anxious, I don't know how much of that, I'm sure there are cases where that is some sort of, you know, you hear the chemical imbalance, but it seems to me like most people have shit going on in their lives that's making them feel like that. And that the drugs are a patch, right, or they're a Band-Aid on a knife wound.
Sure. It's an extremely nuanced conversation. I'll start there. I think like anything, it's sort of like, where is the Goldilocks line here? Because yes, anxiety and depression, you can have a chemical imbalance. You know what else can give you a chemical imbalance?
The drugs,
a shitty social life and no friends and not eating well. And so it's like, what are we saying belongs to who? I will say, just my conceptualization of anxiety and depression is that it is a symptom of something. Right. It is not in and of itself the issue. It's your body's way of communicating that something is wrong, whether that's socialness, isolation, chemical imbalance, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes it takes that medicine to get you back to baseline.
To get you where you need to be.
And then other thing, I mean, I think bipolar, that one is chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
There are certain things.
Yeah, I think that's a different case. I guess maybe I was more referring to the anxiety, like the SSRI kind of.
I do think I think as a culture we want a fix right now. I don't even know if that's American or just the way that we've been.
It's probably just
socialized to technology, and things are instant. Amazon Prime, instant.
Yeah, and it's a bit of human nature too, right?
I mean,
obviously,
right. And especially those emotions.
If I can get a fix now versus in a year.
Yeah, those emotions are so scary that we want them to go away immediately. But I think that also speaks to how. So I have clients I sit with every week. I go, there are no bad emotions. Well, of course there are bad emotions. There's no bad emotions. We've decided that this bucket of emotions over here are bad. Sadness, anger, depression. But that's just because we don't like them. They're telling us something.
Well, you can't be happy all the time. Because the first time something bad happens, if you're, I heard somebody say that if you think the meaning of life is to be happy, then the first time that something comes along that makes you unhappy, you're not going to have any meaning in your life.
Exactly. I think we've sort of, we're not good at talking about emotions at all.
Yeah.
We don't teach our what do you see when a child is crying in the grocery store? What does mom do? Shut up, be quiet. Stop doing that. We're leaving. Instead of teaching our kids how to deal with these strong emotions, we tell them to stuff it, ignore it, and only let the happy ones through. Right. What is that person going to do in 15 years when they're in a relationship, things don't go their way? Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think we have several entry points here. One being increased recognition of what we're feeling. Two, getting a little more curious about what's underneath all of this. And then three, I just think we're an isolated society. COVID didn't help. But before that, I mean, you can pull up this study. I'm not going to quote it exactly, but isolation was like way more dangerous than heart disease. They were finding
in terms of
death.
negative, health implications.
Years off of our life. Because
I can't imagine.
Well,
biologically, right? We used to live in tribes of 150 people. So this whole COVID thing where people are locking themselves in their houses, it's kind of like you gotta kind of weigh the pros and cons, especially if you're young. That's how I always felt about COVID, especially once we kind of
old people though too. I mean, young, yes.
Yeah.
But so many old people. I mean, we're experiencing it with my grandpa right now. They don't want to go to an old.
Yeah, me too.
I get it. It's not glamorous. He wants to live in his house. It retains autonomy. But to go to a community of people your age, I think we have just blown a hole through that in the way that we've set up, the way that we live. I mean, do you know the names of anyone across the street? Like, no, we don't know our neighbors. It's weird.
I know one or two, but I can't even remember their names right now.
And how crazy is that we live our whole life? You could park your car, you could get married, you could have a baby next to someone you know nothing about. That is crazy.
Yeah, I went on a date with a girl last week who we found out that we lived in the same apartment building for a year and we're like one floor apart. Never had any idea, which is crazy.
It's crazy. I think, it's all part of sort of larger problems, and I don't think that there's one fix necessarily, but I hear you. I think also these drug companies are so quick to like raise the prices. I mean, the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just, we've set it up in the wrong way.
Well, they're making a ton of money on the vaccine too.
They're making
that's a whole
of that. I mean, insulin, the list goes on of just the way that we've, the recent like painkiller epidemic and everything.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that was fascinating to me about this is a little off topic. The vaccine stuff is, look, I'm vaccinated, but there was never any talk. We know the type of people, right, that are impacted by COVID, older, more overweight, vitamin D deficiency. There was never any talk from anyone about, you need to change your diet. You need to go out and exercise. You need to get more sunlight. It's just like we want this quick fix. Like, okay, where were we?
You were talking, the health stuff.
Oh yeah, so there's just there's nothing around all these other things that you can do to prevent yourself from dying or getting sick if you have COVID, and all of those things are better for your mental health. And so I feel like we just went off this deep end and
decided what we can control. Perfect example. People won't get the vaccine, or we're taking horse tranquilizers because we feel like we could control that.
Mm-hmm.
The odds of dying from COVID are not nothing.
But they're pretty small.
But you have decided in your brain that you are going to be able to control it with this horse tranquilizer. Yet you get in a vehicle that hundreds of people die from every day and drive your little car on the highway. That's not a problem because we've decided that we have to have this. So we selectively decide what we're going to control against, but this part doesn't apply to me.
It's fascinating you say that because I remember, especially when the lockdowns first happened and people were saying, well, some people were saying we need to go back to living our lives and that there's some amount of risk that we're going to need to take. And the other end was saying, well, you're putting a price on people's lives. And it's like, well, we do that with everything. We could make the speed limit on the interstate 10 miles an hour and nobody would ever die in a wreck, and there'd be 40,000 less car wrecks a year or deaths a year. But we've all decided that we'd rather go 90. So maybe there's a middle ground. We'd all decided that we want to go faster. We want to get places. It's better for the economy. Things get moved around quicker. And we've put a price on that, right? We could make cars cost $200,000 and have all these features so you never got in a wreck. But we don't do that.
We don't do that. And I think we messed up in that time period specifically because we came at this acting like we were having a logical conversation, and we were not. We were having a fear conversation disguised as logic.
Right.
So if we keep trying to solve this conversation with, well, cognitively, we should do this, but take it all away. I'm afraid. I don't want to leave my house. I know I can't control this thing that I can't see. Once we start having a conversation about the fact that fear is underneath both sides, now we can get somewhere. But to pretend that both sides of that was a rational cognitive...
No, it wasn't. Yeah. And then we all go back to our echo chambers, right? And we're listening to whatever the hell news station.
Who can I have back me up that's screaming at the TV at 5?
Yeah. I'm very interested to see... It's bizarre. I mean, this is December of 2021. So mid-February will be 2 years, which is nuts to think. I'm interested to see what the next 2 years look like. And I feel like we're going to be divided into these. I see the tribalism that we're in getting worse and worse. We're going to be divided into these camps. I think you're going to see people who probably wear masks forever, and another group of people who say, fuck this, I'm never wearing a mask.
But I think it'll get bigger. I mean, honestly, if you got a flu, put the damn mask on.
That's fine.
I'm fine with that. But I think it'll get worse in terms of, I think the internet and like our realities that we all live in will become so siloed that
we're listening to different stories.
We exist in different
worlds.
Like literal realities of rules, and I mean, yeah, I worry.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you go back far enough in our society, let's just take the United States, traditionally pretty homogenous in terms of we all had kind of the same story, and that was most people had Judeo-Christian values. We're coming from 1,000 or 2,000 years of here's the story about morality and why we act the way we do. And as that's gone away, and I think with the rise of the internet and the ability to just kind of go into your echo chamber, we become extremely tribal, and we don't really even agree anymore on the fundamentals. And that's where I think what's driving a lot of this divisiveness is we don't even agree on the basics anymore, let alone where we want to go.
Well, the great irony is the basics of a lot of those religions, the people that are spouting them don't even believe in. Love thy neighbor. I mean, we could go down the list of things that we've just, I think we've turned some of our religions into political parties, which is a dangerous game to make them the same thing. And I think, yeah, back then maybe, I don't know, I'm no historian, but I think the danger was less because you could talk to as many people in your village as you could want to.
You can only
don't have the platform of Twitter.
Right.
A world leader could decimate a country and like give a warning via Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't think I can even conceptualize how connected we are in a way that is wonderful and also like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it's terrifying. The other thing, just kind of hit on what you were saying, is oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. Oh, religion is one of these things, like we were talking about definitions earlier. To me, religion is just whatever you put at the top of your value hierarchy. And so even people who are not religious in the traditional sense, you have something that you put at the top of your value hierarchy. So you also have this problem of you have traditionally religious people, and you have other people who think they aren't religious, but they are religious because they're humans, and it's a human fundamental, right?
Yeah,
Whether
you're putting something up there. It could be money, it could be God, it could be you.
It could be a million things. It could be, I think you see it like in the vegan community a little bit. Like there's all these, I think you see it in like scientific rationalism can be just as dogmatic. So
everyone's just trying to say that they've figured out why we're here on this earth. And the reality is a lot of us just can't sit with the fact that we have no fucking idea.
Well, that's the problem with ideologies, right? The world is extremely complicated and nuanced, and it's gray. There's almost no black and white. And what ideology does is it knocks on your door and it says, hey, I have the answer to everything, and it's really simple and easy, and you're going to go from a place to chaos to order, right? You were in this place where everything was confusing and you didn't get it. And now here's this ideology, whether it's on the far left or the far right, something that's religious, anarchist, whatever you want to call it. It now explains the world to you in a place that brings you from chaos to order.
I also think it taps into what you were saying though earlier about the tribe group, is that humans will do just about anything to feel like they belong somewhere.
Yes.
Even if that's screaming at a rally that's based on hate, you will feel like you belong somewhere, and that you will take that over isolation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're social creatures, right? Right down. I mean, you can believe what you want. If you want to look at chimpanzees and see how social they are, or just observe humans, I mean, we are social, and there is that need to belong that is just a human universal. So yeah, people
100%. I mean, I think that's a lot of the therapy work that I do, is teaching people shame is just as painful as like hurting your leg. Like, we, in our parts of our brain, we experience it as just as painful, social pain, as we do physical pain. Because when we take it back to tribes, you got isolated from your crew out on the savannah. You were fucked. You were not making it. You can't fight a rhino by yourself. So like, it really was a matter of life or death if you could figure out how to belong to your group.
Yeah.
And that is so hardwired in us, even if we.
And I think that's why you see, especially in our politics, people don't want to be in the middle, because if you're in the middle's the worst place to be. You can go from the left to the right. But if you go from the left to like center left or moderate, now everybody hates you. The tribe you left hates you, and the tribe that you haven't, the other tribe doesn't really accept you. So that's why you see almost, right? That's why we have this system where there's two parties, and they're just being driven further and further apart because nobody wants to jump into the middle.
And each side is being told that the other is your mortal enemy. Not just like we don't agree with what they're saying, but this other group is the reason that our world is on fire. And I mean, you want to bring people together faster, give them a common enemy.
Give them a snake to fight. Yeah.
It works. And I think we can speak to our lesser natures as humans, or we can come above that. I don't know. I would love to think that our world will like eventually reject all of it, and maybe the younger generation will have grown up in this and decide that they don't want to engage. Maybe we just gotta wait till our great aunts stop using Facebook and we'll be fine. I don't know.
Yeah. Or that we're fighting World War III with sticks and stones. I
don't know.
Well, I think we just need music therapy, right, to really save the world.
I think those celebrities tried that on Zoom and it didn't work.
Oh my God, I did see that. That was bad. Well, look, I really appreciate you coming in. This is an awesome conversation. Sorry for the technical glitches, but we're good. We're still rolling. And thanks a bunch.
Thank you, Jeff.
Awesome.
We did it.
We did it.